Hey everyone, welcome back. So in this video, we're going to work on building a simple web page. I'm going to be using VS Code to do that, which is already installed on all of the Madison College computers. However, if you're working from home or from another location and would like to install VS Code at home, please check out the video that's out there in Blackboard for you that walks you through that installation process, as well as checking out any video that you would like to for installing extensions. And if you're looking for ones specific to this course, there is a video out there in Blackboard for which ones I recommend using while you're taking this class. For now though, let's go ahead and get started. So again, I have VS Code open, and before I start my first thing, I want to point out that if you have VS Code installed and you're noticing that you have parent and child folders that are presenting inline in your Explorer window, we can fix that by going into our settings menu, and from here we're going to select Features, Explorer, and you can see there is a section called Compact Folders with a checkbox right below it. We're going to uncheck this box. And as soon as we do, we should notice that we no longer have parent-child folders displaying inline. Now with that out of the way, let's go ahead and get back to this week's lecture. So since this is week 3, we're going to create a week 3 folder inside of our demos folder. And if you remember from last time, we can create a folder and a file at the same time if we were to hover over and select our file icon. So I'm going to add a new file, and I'm going to name this week 3 demo / index.html. This is going to create a folder called week 3 demo, and then inside of that folder automatically insert an index.html file. This is a great time-saving feature that we really want you to work through, so make sure you're trying to use this as often as possible. I'm also going to create 2 subfolders for our week 3 demo, one for our style sheets and one for our images. So with the week 3 demo selected, I'll select Add Folder. We'll name this Images. And then I'll create a second folder. We'll name this Style Sheets. It's a great practice moving forward to always use lowercase letters when you're starting out a name for a folder, a file, or pretty much anything else when we're using code. Okay, with that out of the way, I'm going to select my index.html file, and I'm going to select Live Preview, which is this button over here on the right-hand side. This is giving us a real-time view of our code as it would appear into a browser as we type. So let's say I just start typing all of this information. Hello, learning to code is awesome. What is happening to extra spaces? Now, as I was typing that out, you could see on the right-hand side things were starting to present. But what happened to all of those extra spaces that we were adding into our code? Well, the browser is rendering this content as I typed it in, but only as it understood it. It's interpreting what I'm writing as just plain text. So no matter how many kinds of line spaces or tabs or extra line breaks that I add, the browser is just going to treat it as plain text and type it out as if there was nothing in there except for one space in between each word. So there's some very specific things that the browser knows not to recognize. For example, extra line breaks, extra spaces, if it doesn't recognize your markup, and comments are all ignored by the browser. So for example, let's go ahead and add a comment to our page. I'll type in "this is a comment," and then I can do one of 2 different things. I can select all of this, which is a comment, and if I hold down my command and /, or if you're on a PC, that would be Control /, and it will insert the appropriate syntax around our comment to make it an actual comment. And notice as soon as we do that, the browser no longer recognizes that information. So watch again inside of the preview window. If I unselect this or uncomment it using that quick keyboard shortcut with the /, then you can see right away inside of my browser, "this is a comment" is now appearing as if it was being rendered by the browser as regular text. So I'm going to go ahead and add that back in as a comment using Control / or Command / depending on what you're working on. Since I'm working on a Mac, most of my keyboard shortcuts, I'll be using the description as if it were a Mac. However, if you would like to know more about some of the keyboard shortcuts that are available for you, I'll have that information for you out in Blackboard. Okay, we have that back in there as a comment. Now before we really get too far, we need some structure or some foundation to build on. And so far, the browser, using this live preview, it's just regurgitating what we've been typing out on our blank canvas. So to get the ball rolling, we're always going to start all of our pages with a declaration as to what type of a document we're working with. And we do this by using the doc type. So I'm going to type in the less than symbol, an exclamation point, the word doc type, one space, and then HTML, and then a greater than sign. This is what tells the browser that we're specifically working with HTML, and because of the way we're writing it in here, we're telling the browser HTML5. This is always going to be the first line of our page, always. Once the browser knows that we're working with an HTML5 document, the next thing it needs to know is, where does this document start? Well, we're going to have what we call a root element, and that root element defines the start of our page. So we'll add the root element of HTML to our page. Now notice, as soon as I start typing into the editor, VS Code is asking us if we would like to use its recommendation on what it thinks we need based on what we've typed so far. And you can see my second selection down is HTML5. What happens if I select that? Well, VS Code automatically inserts a whole bunch of code to get you started. But for now, I don't want to use that. So I'm going to take that out, and I'm going to use the Tab key while I'm highlighted on this first one, which is the HTML element. So I'll select Tab as a keyboard shortcut, and notice that it inserts the opening and the closing tag at the same time. This is a great time saver for us in the future in terms of the amount of keying that we're doing, but also it's very helpful because it's giving us that second or that closing tag right away, and it decreases the likelihood that we'll have a typo or that we'll miskey something when we're entering it in manually. So I'm going to go ahead and use that. Now the closing HTML tag, that represents the end of our web page, and nothing should ever go after the close of an HTML page. So I'm going to take all of these lines, 6 through 12, I'm going to cut them and paste them directly into the middle of my HTML opening and closing tag. Remember to use keyboard shortcuts when you're doing this. The more you use them, the better you'll get at them, and the faster you'll be able to work. Let's take a moment to talk about comments, because a comment can be put anywhere in our document as long as it's after our doc type, and it can be one-to-many lines as long as it's wrapped inside of the appropriate markers. So we're going to add our name and date between the doc type and our opening root tag. And comments will always start in HTML with a less than, an exclamation, and 2 dashes, and then end with 2 dashes and a greater than. Well, now that I have my name and date on there, I'm going to go ahead and remove that. I know it's not 2054, but why ruin the mystery of what day I recorded this? The next thing we're going to do is we're going to declare where our metadata will be stored. And metadata, when we use that term, we're referring to data about data. I know that sounds kind of strange, but stick with me because you're going to hear that word a lot. We put all of our metadata inside the head of our document. Specifically, we'll be using the head to render our content title, our CSS, and our JavaScript if we're using it. So directly below my HTML element, I'll insert my head element, typing in the first few letters as I have, and then I'm going to select the Tab key to rapidly insert that head element. I'll immediately select the Return key to break it down to a new line, so there's a space there where I can insert any additional tags that need to go in between the opening and closing head element. For this course, we're always going to have a minimum of at least 2 elements inside of our head element. And if you have an element inside of another element, that's referred to as a child element. So the first one we're going to insert is called the meta element. Again, I'll start typing, and look what VS Code has asked me if I would like to use. Right away, the first one, it's a meta element, and I'm going to take that suggestion and select Tab. We're going to use the meta element to hold our character set. Now for us, we'll be using UTF-8. That's the default for HTML5. So inside of my meta element, I'm going to type in the char set attribute. And I'll set this to UTF-8. The second element that we must have inside of our head is called the title element. So I'll select a return key for a new line, and I'll start typing in title. Again, I'll select the Tab key to auto-insert that title. And we need this because the title of our page is going to appear in our browser tab, and it's also what we use when we save any web page or bookmark it into our browser. Whatever we have for our title, that's the name of our bookmark by default. You can always change your bookmark name, but the default is always going to be taken from the title element inside of your head. So we'll call this My First Web Page. The next element that I want to talk about is the body element. The body element is going to come right after the head element. I'll start typing in body and select tab. Everything that we put inside of the body element is what we want to have display on our page. So I'll select everything that we wanted to have displayed and I'll insert it between the opening and closing body tag using cut and paste. And because I want to have all of my code really tight and very clean, I'm going to reduce all of these extra lines of space that we don't need to see in here between closing tags. So I'll remove lines 20 and 21. So that tightens up the body in HTML. So what have you noticed so far in our preview pane? If you're looking at it and you're thinking, well, nothing's really changed, well, then you're right. Because so far, all we've done is build the foundation or the frame. These are the basic building blocks of all web pages, and they need to contain, at the very least, these items: the doc type, the HTML element, the head element, which includes the meta and title elements, and then a body element. At the bare minimum, that's what we need for a well-formed document. And since we've built that foundation, we're going to continue to add a little more markup to our page so we can describe that content in between the body opening and the body closing tags. But before I get to that, I want to talk just a little bit more about keeping our code nice and clean. If I were to select all of the items that are inside of here and use one tab key, you'll notice that I'm inserting them the exact same space or same amount. I can reduce that space by holding Shift and Tab to go the other direction. If I only wanted to affect one line at a time, I can select Tab or Shift Tab. And notice how my code is being indented. Every child element is indented 4 spaces from its parent element. This is so important when it comes to making your code legible. Your work is going to be graded on your legibility, so learning the correct indentation now is crucial. It's important to form these habits early on. Because tight, clean code is easy to read, it's better to maintain, and when others are working with your code or you're working with others' code, having that code legible and easy to read is going to improve the maintenance, the look and feel, and the quality of your coding. I'll come back to that in just a little bit. But for now, we already know that everything that we want to display goes into the body section. How does the browser know what's the footer? What's a paragraph? Which part of this page is the heading? Well, this is where we use what's called semantic markup to describe our content. And there's 2 different types of HTML elements. We have block level elements and we have inline elements. A block level element belongs on its own line or its own row. Some examples of a block level element would be paragraphs, headings, or a div element. And inline elements are considered text level elements or phrasing elements, and they don't start on a new line. Spacing is sometimes added as required, and some examples of some inline elements would be the emphasis element or an image element. So let's add a few elements around this content on our page to really give it some meaning. And we're going to start with, what's the main heading of our page? I'm going to say hello is our main heading. So I'll type in H1, I'll select tab to auto insert, and then I'm going to move or cut and paste hello so that it lands in between the tags. And notice in the browser, something changed. Finally, we have something that looks a little bit different. So let's keep going. We're going to add a subheading or a second heading just below our first heading. So I'll select return, I'll select H2 and tab, and this time I'm going to insert learning to code is awesome. I'll use cut and paste. Since the browser ignores white space, we're going to remove all of those extra spaces around what is happening to extra spaces, and we'll wrap all of that up into a nice little paragraph element. You may have guessed, I'll select P and then tab, and I'll copy and paste my content directly inside, taking care to remove any extra spaces that are in here. And because we don't want to see all of this space in here, I'm going to remove all of those extra line breaks. If I specifically wanted to have a line break between, let's say, the word happening and to, and so it broke down to a new line, I could insert a specific element called a break element to handle that. So I'm going to type less than, BR, greater than, and notice that it inserted a space between happening and to. And because it's considered an inline element, I didn't have to break this down to a new line. I just left it right up there in line with the rest of my content. Another example of an inline element is an emphasis element. What if we wanted to have the word extra emphasized? Well, we could wrap that into an emphasis element. So I'll come in here, put in an emphasis element, cut and paste extra, and move it over. I'm going to come back now to that writing clean code and keeping it nice and tight, and I want to point out a few things that are inside of my editor. You'll notice I have what I call guidelines appearing on the left-hand side of my editor. A guideline starts at an opening element and it shows you where the closing element lines up. So if I were to select or put my cursor on the first or opening HTML tag, you'll notice that it highlights the companion or closing tag that goes with it. And in doing so, I can see everything that's inside of that opening and closing tag. Those are all children and they should be nested in one space. And anytime you have an opening and a closing tag on separate lines, you don't want to have any content break that line. By that I mean, let's say I selected the opening body element, and you can see that it automatically selects the closing body element. Notice that line that starts at the top of the body element and works all the way down to the closing of the body? That's my guideline. All of the content that sits inside of that needs to be nested in one space. So I would never want to see an element breaking that guideline. Now when I select my opening body and my closing body, sure they're highlighted, but that guideline is interrupted by my H1 element, and that's something that we don't want to see. Visually, that's very disruptive to the document's hierarchy. Another thing that we don't want to do is have inconsistent indentations and spacing. So I wouldn't want to see something like this, where the opening head element is on one line, and the closing head element is not on the same guideline. So you'll notice here that the opening headline and closing headline are not lined up. And similar, inside of my body, I have 3 children, an H1, an H2, and a paragraph. Those are all children to the body element, and they should be lined up with each other. But notice how my H2 is indented more? Some other common things that I might see are having too many spaces above an element or below an element. We wouldn't want to see something like this either. Now, when we're working on some of these smaller exercises, they might be like 100 or less lines of code, and so it may not seem like a whole lot. But once we start working with HTML pages that start to get into the hundreds of lines of code, these extra spaces can really add up fast. And when we're trying to maintain our code, we want to keep it as clean, crisp, and tight as possible, and to make it as easy to read for everyone else as we possibly can, including ourselves. When later on we go back to make any adjustments to our page, we want to find what we're looking for quickly and easily. I'm going to set all of this back to the way it was, though. There we go. Let's add an image. We're going to go out to the Madison College website, and I'm going to save that logo that's presenting in the left corner. So I'll choose this image. I'll right-click on it, and I'm going to save image as logo.png, and I'm going to make sure that I save it in the images folder of our week 3 demo file. Now this is important because we want to have it locally stored in the same folder that we're working with inside of VS Code. So I'll select save, and I'll go back to VS Code, and now when I look inside of my images folder, I should see this logo.png. If I select it, there it is. It's showing me that image. Now when I was saving this, I noticed an error or an issue with the way that I structured my folders, and I'd like to correct that real quick. As you can see, my week 1 folder and my week 3 folder are not correctly in the same demos folder. I'm going to move my week 3 demo folder so that it's actually inside of my demos folder. So with that little thing corrected, I'm going to go ahead and get back to that image. I want to add this image into our page. Since an image element is an inline element, meaning it doesn't break down to a new line, I'm going to insert that into our code, but I'm going to insert it as inline code. So after our closing paragraph, I'll insert a new line, and I'm going to start by typing in image. I'll immediately select tab, and notice that it inserted 2 attributes for me. These are required attributes, and we definitely want to be filling these in every single time that we insert an image. These 2 pieces of information, or these 2 attributes, are there to support the image element. It's going to help the image element give all of the information it needs in order to be successful. Starting with the source attribute, or SRC. This is the path to get to the actual image that we want to render. And then the alt or alternative attribute, ALT, this is what's going to happen just in case it can't find the image that it needs to load. It's going to present alternative text to let the end user know what the end result should have been had that image loaded, or if they were using images in their page. So I'm going to start first with this alt attribute, and I'm going to put in here the Madison College logo. Now that I've put that in there, notice what renders on our page. a broken image link? Well, this is very important because we haven't been able to identify the location of our file. It's not displaying on our page, but we still want to let everyone know something should have gone here, and it's the Madison College logo. So now when I fill in the source of our image, which is in the images folder, it's the logo.png. And as soon as I type that in, now all of a sudden, that Madison College logo text value that was our alternative value, that disappears because it's been replaced with the actual image for us. Now the next thing we're going to look at doing, because we've written this beautiful web page, we're going to make sure that it's valid by running it through what's called a validator. Before I do that though, let's save those changes and get rid of that dot. Okay, in order to validate files, we're going to go out to the W3Orgs validator. So I'm going to go out to my web tab and I'm going to type in validator.w3.org. Now here I can select by file upload or by direct input. I like to do this by file upload. It's very helpful when you're working with multiple files down the road so that you know exactly which file you've targeted it's going to display. If you do by direct input, you won't have that value without having to read through your input to make sure which page you've already validated. So for me personally, I like to validate by file upload. So I'll select the File Upload tab, and I'm going to choose a file. And I'll select my index.html file. Now from here, all I need to do is press check. Now before I hit check, I'm expecting to see an error in my validation. And there it is. There's two different kinds of errors or warnings that you can get. There's an error, which is there's definitely something wrong, and there's a warning, which is there's something that should be fixed, but we're going to render your document anyway. A warning means it was able to resolve without having to have it fixed. An error means there's definitely something that needs to be addressed. For our class, both of these need to be fixed before you submit any works. So if you run validation and you don't get a green everything's good to go message, you'll need to fix all of those errors in validation before you submit. But let's take a look at what this error or warning says. It says consider adding a lang attribute to the HTML start tag to declare the language of this document. When it comes to our errors, when it comes to our warnings, it's very crucial that we understand the text that's being displayed. We want to break it down so that we understand exactly what it's trying to tell us. In this case, we're looking for the keywords of attribute and start tag. And the reason that we're doing that is because we want to identify what's the difference between a tag, an element, or an attribute. In this case, it's telling us we need to add an attribute to our HTML start tag, and it's actually telling us the attribute to add, in this case, lang. So let's go back to VS Code. There's our HTML start tag. And an attribute is always going to go into the start tag. And specifically, it was telling us to add the language attribute or lang attribute. So L-A-N-G, and we're going to set this to EN for English. I'm going to save these changes and then revalidate. So I'll select Save. And I'm going to choose File again, select my index file, Open, select Check, and now we have a green document check completed, no errors or warnings. This is what we want to see every time that we submit anything for projects or exercises. If you ever get an error and you're not sure what it means and you don't know what to do, make sure you're asking before you submit. If you submit anything to Blackboard with an error, chances are it's going to be sent back to you to fix or correct those before it's graded. It takes a lot of practice to understand all of the error and warning messages that are out there. Some of the tips that I would like to share with you would be making sure that you're paying attention to the keywords. Is it focused on a tag, an attribute, an element, a selector? What exactly is it that it's trying to point you to? Look for those keywords. Even though it might give you a line number, that may not be accurate. So don't always look at that for accuracy. It might say it's on line 44, but it might be on line 44 that the browser recognized that there was an issue, not necessarily that the issue was on line 44. Which sounds kind of confusing for right now, but you'll come across this, I promise you. The next thing is always fix one error at a time, because every time you fix an error in your source code and revalidate, you'll find that that one error could be the cause or the reason for several other errors that were found afterwards. So sometimes you'll fix an error and then multiple errors will go away as a result. So fix one error at a time and then revalidate in between each error that you fix, always starting with the first error on your page. Some other common mistakes that I see: forgetting to save your document before you do that validation. Seems kind of obvious, but it almost happened to me just a few moments ago. If you don't see something change on your website, chances are you forgot to save. You might be missing a closing tag. That's another popular one. This is where you're putting in that opening HTML element and forgetting the close one, or the opening head and forgetting the close one. You get the idea. If you're using the editor's auto insert feature, you can cut down on a lot of those errors. And another one that I see a lot is the wrong image file extension. So for example, if you were to type in the logo.png but you accidentally typed in logo.jpg, that would be another issue or another error that I would see common. So with all of that, that's my introduction on a simple web page. Now if you have any questions on any of the content in this video, please don't hesitate to ask.